let's get started here. Specifically, what I am doing with platform upgrades on this stream is going to be I got a few issues come back from the last couple game jams I did. So I did one that I streamed a bunch, streamed like maybe half of the work, maybe a third of the work last week, all the way up until last night. And uh, then the week before that, I also did a game jam just privately by myself. And in both cases, I put them out. And I've gotten a few issues back, um, which which is means I need to upgrade the platform layer now. The platform layer, it works on my desktop, it works on my laptop. It does not work on it does not work on some other people's machines, and so I'm gonna use some of the info I've gotten back. Now the cool thing, I'll just go and grab details from these real quick. But the cool thing is my platform layer comes with an error system, which appears to be working very well. Whenever someone has an issue, they're not just getting a crash, they're getting a message window pop up that has information. Sometimes it's not enough information. Sometimes I'm looking at it thinking, oh gosh, I wish that I had included a little bit more detail in that message. Because a user who has an issue doesn't always think to say like, oh, here's the graphics card type that I have, and here's the window resolution or the screen resolution on my monitor and stuff like that. I don't always share every detail, and so it might be nice if my system could pack a little bit more detail in there, just so that users, when they send me the message that they got, I can learn a little bit more about how I might recreate their issue. But let's track down what I do know. So I think, one is this. So you might see me resizing the window real quick. I'm just cropping the view here so we can focus on the bit that I am talking about. So I've got this issue. I get a crash as soon as I click the exe. This is on Windows 11. So we have Windows 11. On start. Number one. So this is on start, operating system, Windows 11. What else did they give us? It says, so this right here, I'm going to write down a little bit of that. Error message says 010 error C102. So this is one where I wish I had just a little bit more information, like the OpenGL vendor information, right? OpenGL could have reported vendor information. But what you're seeing here, I recognize these error messages. That is what a shader compilation error looks like. And shader compilation errors stand out because they look kind of like other compilation errors. They got the error message there, and they have in parentheses the line number. But what's unique about an error from a shader is that OpenGL doesn't know the name of the file. It doesn't have, main.c, so it just gives you an index for the file. So it's saying in file index 0 on line 10, here's the error: invalid operands to slash. So maybe I'm not being particularly accurate in my use, or particularly precise in my use of the divide operator in GLSL. Maybe the types could be an issue. Now this one I came from, is a second one here is an issue from someone who I'm more familiar with. This is someone who always reports issues very promptly on everything I do. They gave me lots of feedback on 4Coder back in the day. Mr. Mixer, always appreciate your bug reports. So this is an issue that is not an issue with the game jam I did last week, the story roguelike. This is not with that. This is just with the Darklands one, because only Darklands had the hacked Wasapi the hacked Wasapi code, and apparently it's got some issues. It displays the title screen. Sometimes I go in game, but it quickly crashes after that. And this is what they're getting in the debugger when the crash happens. So this is a crash. This is a wild crash, not a understood error. And there's also this clue that it sounds really bad. Which suggests something busted about how I'm filling buffers or handling buffers. You have a wild crash at or near start. And from the debugger, because luckily this user knows how to give me a message from a debugger. Some users wouldn't know that, and that's not their fault. But in this case, we got lucky and got some bonus info. The sound is really bad. Okay, so that's another user-reported issue I want to try to deal with today. And I have another issue which got reported on the game jam for the story roguelike page. Let me figure out how to navigate here. No, not that button. This one? Excellent. And so we're getting this. Following message box frame error. Okay, requested canvas dimension is too big. And okay, so this person included a little bit of information. This is happening. It appears to the user to be happening on start. It's actually a frame error, which we know because of this. So that's a part. This is not a wild error. My error system is catching this issue and reporting what's happening. And so we know that this is being detected at the end of the first frame, but from a user's perspective, that's on start. Requested canvas dimension is too big is the message. And the information they shared with us is that their monitor resolution is this. Very intuitive, very insightful, but the message I gave them prompted them to share this information. So even though I've failed to include all the relevant information in the error message was enough relevant information to prompt a user to share more, and that's great. This up here, not so much, right? A raw shader error did not prompt someone to go and tell me what graphics card they have plugged in. So, that's the things I want to take a look at today to upgrade my platform layer. All right. Are we, I see someone, it was Brett, someone in the chat said RIP. I hope that means, my stream, I hope that doesn't mean my stream went down. Hope that means RIP as in someone ran the game and it didn't work, maybe, was what we're saying RIP to. Anyway, if my stream did go down, all right, great. Just checking. Everything looks fine on my end. Okay, so there's a couple of things to do today. One is to try to fix these issues. I definitely want to end there. But before I get there, the other thing to do is, I think at least this one is one that I can also learn from the situation and upgrade the error message a little bit, so that future times I might, there's no reason to think this is the only time I'll have a shader bug. The games I've shipped right now each have their own sets of shaders anyways, so it's very possible that there's no shader bug in the story roguelike, and that this is just a I'll put these here, Darklands. Darklands. These are the names of the game jams that these were reported on. Dungeons of Alhebra. There we go. So, it's very possible that this is not a general issue with my code base, but rather an issue with the shader in this game, because this game had a custom shader instead of using my default one. So I want to try to fix that, but more importantly, I want to improve the error message that comes back. And if I do get to fix these bugs, that'll make the game, I'll be able to update Darklands. And then this one, this is a more general issue. Either of these games could have this issue. And the reason I know that this is general is because nothing fancy is happening with canvas dimensions on either game. They're both going through the default stuff I did for that. So this code path is common to both of them, and that's it. A thing we can upgrade for the whole code base is whatever is leading to this. But I think for starters, I want to let me actually lay this out into a specific list of to-dos for the stream. First, I'm going to do improve error messages when we have shader compilation errors. 2, I'm gonna do address the problem of in 3. Then I'm gonna do address the problem in 1, and then I'm gonna do investigate 2 further. And so the reason I've got different instructions for different things here is I don't actually know what 2 is about. This is a wild crash. This is also from code that I didn't understand. This was from a gist. The audio, I plugged it in a day from a gist, and apparently I either didn't fully learn from the gist how I needed to use the code, or the gist had a problem that that was baked in or something. I don't know. Of course, this is also specific to a particular user. Most players aren't seeing this issue, so this could also be context sensitive in a way that I'm not sure exactly how I will deal with. So that's a harder deal. This and this and this are things that I kind of just know what we need to do. This fixing this shader bug might be a little tricky, so it's later. This is going to be stuff that the whole code base benefits from. These are specific to the Darklands Game Jam game. So that's reasoning why these are different and what order I chose for them. Abner, yes, we're talking about GLSL. So I've got a GLSL I've got a GLSL shader submitted through the OpenGL API directly. It's not on SOCL or anything like that. I don't have a transpiler to worry about. It's just GLSL going straight to a driver compiler. So this is happening in the well, we have the, okay, let's look for the string requested. Canvas dimension is too big. There it is. So this is right here in my OGL render implementation. And it's when you call canvas init. So let me let me do a little more digging. Canvas init is called by rbegin, which is called by... Okay, so this is an issue that wouldn't actually affect... I have to take something back. This is an issue that wouldn't actually affect Darklands, because Darklands did not use the render helper layer. It just went straight to OpenGL. And so, while it's true this is a piece of code shared by my whole code base, it's not necessarily true that every program on my code base does, in fact, have to opt into using this code. So anything I ever wrote that did use the built-in renderer instead of making its own renderer would have this problem, though. Now, this is just some hard-coded maximum dimension. Wait, this isn't... I skipped the improve error message thing for some reason. Well, I've already started loading this problem into my brain, so let's continue with it. I'll do them out of order now that I've started. So here it is. Here is where I manually set 2K as the maximum width and height. And no surprise, the person reporting the issue has a monitor with a larger screen width than that. No, I don't use any abstraction over the shaders. I don't transpile my shaders. If I want to support, Metal and OpenGL, I just write two shaders. My shaders are so darn simple that doing that way, if I just grabbed like an existing transpiler and it was super painless and stuff, then maybe that'd be good. But I kind of just feel more comfortable on the direct stuff. I know it's sort of NIH and maybe annoying to like always go to the lowest level available to you rather than use an abstraction that has it baked in, but I don't want to have to figure out if I run into an issue with Zokel where I go to ask questions about a more niche, more narrow audience type of thing. I want to be on the layer which is used by everybody, whether or not they know it, because that's the layer where the issues I see will directly relate to the things that are most easiest to find, and also it'll mean that I'm less likely. I'm on a layer that is more likely to last for a longer period of time in the same form without having what's the word I'm looking for? Without having like evolution from an author, right? Like OpenGL is this like monolithic thing. Even if it changes from version to version, compatibility is sort of a industry demand, whereas nobody has an industry demand to keep Zokel working. You know what I mean? So anyway, I could just say, hey, let's bump up the max canvas width and height. I want to track down and see if there are any downsides to that. Maybe this needs to be dynamic, or maybe the answer is just like we make these 8K limits instead of 2K limits, and then the next time we bump this up is when someone has a 10K monitor or a 12K monitor or whatever is next, right? Okay, so the thing here is the canvas I create is always based on this size, no matter what. Okay, so that canvas, what is it for? This is the canvas texture, which gets set up. We can see, so canvas texture ends up, if the whole initialization is successful, texture. Yeah, if the canvas texture isn't being referenced anywhere, then it must be because the frame buffer is the actual handle we use, right? Yeah, there it is. Yes, we don't reference the canvas texture again, but the canvas texture is living as a part of the main frame buffer. And so it does matter. And if I make this like 8K by 8K, then no matter how big your monitor is, and no matter how big the window is we're rendering to, there's always this allocation of 16 kilobytes, 16 megabytes. For the background, right? I think I'm fine with that. So this whole thing is that it's like this is the get it working without overthinking it mode, right? That's why I have a render layer. If you really wanted to fine tune things to your situation more carefully, you'd use a custom renderer on OpenGL for your purpose. If it turns out I'm building a lot of stuff on this and I need this to be smarter, I'm going to need it to be smarter in a way bigger way than just like passing dimensions in from here. Right? Because I could do that. I could do, hey, when we go to init the renderer, get dimensions here, and we can get the monitor size before that. Like we could imagine something like this. Graphics, monitor dimensions, get monitor dimensions, right? And you could imagine passing that to here. And then you're saying, hey, the renderer can, basically what this actually says though, so this is where it's a little tricky. This is a lie, because it's not saying we need to know the monitor dimensions in order to render. What this is literally saying is set at the renderer init what the maximum canvas size of the render is going to be. Now, I think a smarter thing that might more likely be what we want if this was going to get more flexible would be dynamics to this system. So right now, when I init, I set up the frame buffer and it's done. What could happen is we set up a frame buffer of 2K by 2K, and then we say, hey, if you ever pass in a dim here that's too big, instead of erroring out, we reconstitute the entire canvas, right? This could just go down a path that's like dynamic update to the canvas size. Now that might be the right thing to do, but if it was going to do that, it would mean, so basically the way I think about errors like this is an error like this is a case where you kind of got backed into a corner and you have not got a code path that lets gets you back into something working, right? So there's something threatened to not work and you either couldn't or didn't come up with a code path that would get it back into a good state and working again. And so it would pretty much be strictly an upgrade to eliminate an error message and replace it with code that directs things back to the happy path. And that has the additional benefit that if you are on a computer with a smaller window or smaller monitor, or if the window always stays small on your screen for an application, it doesn't have to be a 16 megabyte allocation. It only becomes big like that. And in this case, it would actually be 8 megabytes because the person who submitted has 5K horizontal and like 2K vertical. So when we round that up, it'd be like 8 times 2 times a megabyte. Oh, I've been saying 16 megabytes. It would be 64 megabytes. It'd be 8 times 8. Not 8 plus 8. Anyway, yeah, that feels like it would be a good thing to do rather than just saying you always get 64 megabytes of canvas set aside for every one of my applications that you're running, because I might want to have more than one of those too or something, right? Like I don't know. I don't want to take up all the graphics memory. I also don't have anything that lets me inspect the graphics memory capacities right now, which I could have. Like I could ask OpenGL some questions about what its capabilities are. So that I could like learn on a person's computer if they can handle that. But again, that would just lead to this needing to be dynamic instead of fixed. So I'm not gonna fix this yet. I'm gonna say we did some work on the problem in 3, and we decided fix the problem in 3 by resizing the canvas dynamically if needed. Let's see if we can do that, and if that can happen fast enough for our liking. I think it can. It's one texture allocation. That should be something you can do in a frame. Especially if it's like a one-time thing just to upgrade the canvas to the right size. So let's get to that, but let me do that later because I still want to, pick off some of these lower hanging fruit now that that's a more difficult problem that I've reduced it to. So let's do the error messages and the shader compilation errors. So here we have let me see if we go into Darklands, this will be in Darklands GL. So this is the code for the Darklands game jam, and at some point I'm going to want to figure out what lines it's talking about that have division. Maybe it's these. It's probably these because there are 4 of them. I showed you I only saved one of them here, but it's probably these 4 divides right here that it doesn't like. And if I had to guess, it's because it doesn't like the fact that I used implicit cast from int to float right here. So probably fixable. Terrius Python, yep. Some of the first person who called me out on the 2K by 2K canvas was someone with an ultra wide. That does seem to be the case. That does seem to be what happened. Actually, it wasn't the only person who hit this issue. I think someone with a regular high definition monitor also hit this issue, but it wasn't someone who mentioned it on itch. It was someone who commented about it to me in person. So I don't have an error message from them to actually put in the list. They just mentioned like, oh, it said my screen is too big or something, and I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, that doesn't count since it's not on the list that we have here. So I think I know what the division issue is going to be here. The question then is, okay, look at this. Here's where I'm taking in my shaders, and here I'm emitting an error. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Here I am emitting an error from the shader log, and the only thing I'm emitting is the shader error itself. So we have 2 choices of how to consider improving this. This is kind of interesting. One thing I could do is say my helper, which takes in the source of a shader and compiles it, and then if it succeeds or fails, it returns the handle in the log to you either way. It could modify the log. It could take the log from the shader, and then if the compilation failed, it could decorate the log with the extra information. It could fill in like oh, here's some OpenGL vendor info for you or whatever. I could build that in here, and the advantage to building it in there is that then users of this basically keep the same usage code. They can grab the shader log and emit it, right? Now, there's some other things I could think about doing. One thing here is that, like, it's kind of weird that I have to emit this from this layer at all, right? So I have done this whole, like, error-free pass over a lot of things. This could... You could imagine this being an API that you just use like this. vShader.handle equals 0. So if the vShader handle equals 0, then that's how we know there's an error. And we don't touch the log at all, because what we would do is say the log actually gets emitted right here. So the log wouldn't be a return. It would be, hey, if we had a failed compilation, the OpenGL helper itself just emits the log right there. And then, of course, if you're not familiar with my error system, that doesn't mean that the caller is deprived from seeing the log. The caller can always do error begin, accum begin, and error accum end. And then they will be the one who gets to read the error message. But if they don't care about error messages, they can just not wrap the function call, and then someone else, like the main loop of the program, can still catch it. I think that's the right thing to do. So let's make the plan for our first upgrade to the code base. By the way, this is like totally expected stuff. I wrote these like last year. The graphics system really spanned like a year and a half of work on it, and I didn't at the time have any programs to build on top of it. Now I've built 2 programs on this system using different configurations. One of them uses more of the render helpers, one of them uses less. But either way, I've actually started putting these into use, and so now the design can improve in a way that it just couldn't improve on theoretical grounds alone. So let's make the changes necessary to OGL make shader so that it no longer returns the log explicitly. So the first thing is the shader struct says that it carries a log with it. That's not necessary. It can actually just become, look at that. It can actually just become like this. For now, maybe an OGL shader can literally just be the gluint, the GLUint of the shader, right? Like it could just be like this now, right? Make shader, make program. It just spits out the uint that you need. So that'll be cool. Make shader will look like this. Result will just become like that. That should go away. I assume that was there from an old debugging pass that must have happened that didn't get cleaned up. Here, you can see we're doing the log. So another cool thing is we're not going to need to pass an arena in because we're not returning the log back. So that's a huge improvement. Anytime you can make something work without having to return allocated data, I think that's better. Right, now we're saying you just get back this handle, literally from the thing. If there's an error log, that's going through the error emit path now, which all handles this without having to explicitly pass down arenas and return strings and stuff. So that does mean here where I'm using my arena, I need to switch to using the Scratch arena. There we get the log So that's the log from the compilation. We get the compile status. So now look at this. The log is only being emitted if the compile status is 0. I think that's a little bit different than what I had before. Previously, if the system wanted to, it could read the log and find a string and return it, even if it wasn't an error. And now we're saying we're only going to return the string through, and we're going to return it through this error path. But we're only going to send it out to the outside universe if there was an error. So that's a little bit of a change. But I think it's fine. Like, if we really wanted to get into, like, oh, wait, maybe you want to be aware of shader warnings. If that's a thing that happens, or shader notes, if that's a thing that happens, we could imagine going through and upgrading again for that purpose. But it's fine like this for now. I'm only out in the use cases I have. I was only reporting the log for errors anyways. So this is not like a loss in features because I wasn't using this feature yet. The feature being the potential to catch notes. The potential to catch notes about the compilation. So here we have the shader, and here we're going to fill the result. So we used to have to go in and set the fields. The result is just the shader handle itself now. So the way this whole thing works is we come in here. If the API is initialized, we go ahead and we don't need trap scratch. Let's do it like that. That's fine. So you come in here. If the API is initialized, you create a shader, set its contents, try to compile it, read its log into your Scratch memory, try to check the compilation status. If the compilation failed, you clean up after yourself and you emit whatever was in the log. And then you take the shader that you ended up with, which might have become 0 if there was a failure, or it might be not 0, and you return that at the end. Okay, so that's a small change in the sense that not anything major is different. But it's going to be kind of a big change in terms of the, like, how do I want to put this? These little bits of friction that live on an API can really change how willing you are to use it at its fullest potential. So it's an important change, even if it's a relatively small rearrangement. Program, and then we want to emit the log there. And you don't need an arena either, but that means we need to give you a Scratch arena. Here. So once again, and where we referred to the arena, that becomes a Scratch arena now. Okay, now anywhere where we used this, it's gonna be wrong because we've changed how the API is shaped a little bit. You don't need to pass the arena down to make it work. All you have to do to check is ask if vShader is equal to 0. Yeah. So there, hopefully you can sort of see what I mean. Like, this isn't a huge change, but it does kind of like make the code slightly less of a headache just to witness the existence of the code, right? It's a small step forward. An even better step forward would be if I didn't have to do this like extra step of checking errors everywhere and setting errors from handles. We're not there yet. We don't have the solution to that problem readily available. But a lot of this like accessing subfields goes away and we're just dealing with the handles. which is great. Makes all the code a little shorter, which you'll love to see. Manual cleanup of intermediates. So you do not love to see that, but it's necessary sometimes. All right, so there we go. That's back to exactly the way things were before. Slightly better design. Internal design, right? The internal design is slightly better, but the behavior is identical. But with that shift, now I'm going to look again at those things. So I've done the tweak of the design internal details, and now I'm going to change the features a little bit. So the person who reported Bull Manitor, I don't know if it's similar to Ryan's error thing. I don't know if I've seen the Substack post about that. But I talked about how I do my error thing. It's probably similar. I'm going to guess that Ryan and I are probably having a very similar approach. But you can go to my YouTube video here. Switching to see better errors and development tools. And in the better errors section, I talk about how my system works in detail. But basically, there is sort of error emit goes to the thread local variables error context thingy. It is a thread local, yes. There is a chain of nodes, yes. And there's an arena specifically set aside for the error data. And so this string gets copied onto that chain if the node doesn't already, if the chain doesn't already have a string. So that's the main idea. And then there's like a begin accumulate and end accumulate feature, which lets you like push a new empty node onto the stack so that you can like locally see errors from specific things. Yeah, not surprising. Not surprising. I don't remember seeing a Substack about this from Ryan, but yeah. We use a very basically similar set of like building blocks to design our systems, so they tend to look very similar. Gotcha. Yeah. I don't remember that one, but I haven't seen the I haven't checked his Substack in a bit for the new posts. Right, so I want to modify the string I emit. So right now, when I emit the string, I just put the error message there. I think what I'd like to do is split things up so this like shader error, new line, the log, right? And then before that, I could maybe put like some GL vendor issue stuff. Do I have? I probably don't have in my OGL funcs. I probably don't have any of the things you need for doing that kind of thing. I would be surprised if I bothered. Okay, so we're gonna need to pop in over to references and grab the GL core arb file thingy do. And in here, what's the name of this function? Is it like a version? I might need to just Google real quick what the OpenGL API way of doing this is. I think it's something like you yeah, I don't. It's not popping out to me. Just scanning along. Get string might be the one I need. Let's take a look at GL get string docs real quick. See if that's the one I need. If this isn't it, well, here we got vendor, renderer version, shading language version. I think this is what I wanted. Returns a pointer to a static string describing some aspect of the current GL connection. And so, yeah, this is what I want. Voxel Riffs asks if I'm looking for a shader info log, but that gets me the, I'm trying to, shader info log is the one I've already got, right? That gives me my compilation errors from the shader. I'm trying to upgrade it to put the OpenGL details in, because if a user sends me, hey, I got a bug, your thing doesn't run, and they send me a shader error, but I don't know what version of OpenGL they're on, or like specifically if I don't know what vendor they're on, then I'm in trouble. So I'm just going to grab all of these. That's my goal. So we want this function. GL get string void does not return void. It returns this stuff. Okay, and it has these parameters. So there's get string. Now we got vendor, renderer, version, and then in a later, yes, we need OpenGL definitions. Let's see, this is somewhere in this range. So I don't know if I've talked about this before. But something I like to do with my OpenGL definitions file is to keep the constants in sorted numerical order, because that just means that I don't it makes it very easy to ensure I don't accidentally put the thing in there twice, or like lose track of what I have and haven't added and stuff. It's you know, lets me binary search manually. What's this one called? Shading language version. Okay, so that goes down. That might be a little annoying sometimes, because things which seem related to each other won't actually end up next to each other. But, you know, it is text land programming. This is programming with text files. This is the deal we make. You can't have your stuff organized in all the ways you want. Maybe GLU byte is new to my code as well. So let's go drop that into the definitions up here. And we'll go with a U8. All right. So with that, I should be able to, once I know I'm going to use the log. So something I could do is say like, hey, these logs, we only grab them if we're even going to bother emitting an error. And then we can add in some of these other things. So GL get string, and then the things we want are GL vendor, GL renderer, GL version, GL shading language version. Now it's probably going to get all annoyed at me for not marking these as constant. We'll see. And we don't actually need to convert these into normal C API or normal string API. You know, normally that's my initial instinct is just be like, all right, they gave me the C string, like null terminated strings. Let's get off of those right away. But I'm just gonna, the only thing I'm doing with these strings right now is sending them straight out to printf, which actually can handle a null terminated string just fine. So why don't we just leave it that way, right? So we could do this and then the log like that, and do the same thing again down here when we spit out the program. And what's the issue? Right, the consts. So if I add the const, is that it? You go home happy? All right, I'll tango. I'll play it that way this time. I don't usually like to play along with this, but okay, something's not good. Something's not good. Let's see. So there's a couple of reasons why this might be failing. It might be that I changed something in a way that it's failing, but I haven't actually run this all day. It's possible that like when I shipped the build version of this, that I rearranged the paths in a way that is not letting it run or something. I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna hop into Remedy and see why that would be happening. The font came back null. The font ID looks fine. It feels kind of like it's not finding the data path anymore. So let's go to here. So it looks like it found a file. Yeah, that looks like it did find a file. So the font is actually getting found. That's not going to explain it. Remedy's not letting me scroll right now. I don't know what that means. There we go. How did we get into this situation? You're trying to lay out this string here, which goes here, font ID. Yeah, so that looks like it should be able to work. The question, I guess, is if I come in here, font ID 1, font size 32, will I see any clues in here about why it's not working? How did this is non-obvious why this would be breaking right now. We got a loose font. Did our font bake? Our font bake returned null, huh? Maybe something about building the texture that isn't working now. I suppose that's the one connection into OpenGL that could... R API active check. Wait, that's failing? How could that be failing? The render isn't initialized now. Okay, I need to step through renderer initialization because I'm getting the feeling that maybe something I just changed did in fact break the boot up sequence. Okay. So, first shader comes in to get compiled. Compile status is good. So we return a 1, which means we don't have an error. We don't have an error here. Oh, here's the problem. Here I'm checking the program handle wrong. This should be coming back non-zero because it's succeeding, and then I accidentally treat that as if that's the error path. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so shader compilation stuff still works. And let's go and break the codebase's divide. So the person who submitted the issue probably has a vendor whose driver does not like the implicit cast of this integer into a float so that it can be divided by another float, which is what I am relying on here. But let's make it worse than that by saying we forgot to divide entirely. Now there's no shader that compiler that could possibly make sense of this. And we get okay, so thoughts. I think I could just drop the labels here. And that way they could all align on the left. Shader errors says null. That's not great. Let's figure out why that's happening. So we're going to drop these. And this needs an expand on it to work. There's the mistakes. You know, maybe something we should do, maybe if I, you know, my next stream on Monday, a good code base feature that I am missing is custom format strings. I'm still on standard library format strings. So maybe it's time my code base got custom format strings and I didn't have to do straight expand anymore. Maybe. Of course, if I did do that, I'd probably also want to think about it a little harder because I might want to say like, hey, what if I'm making a program that has a special feature that is not for the whole code base? How are you supposed to... yeah, I'm not getting a compilation error now, weirdly enough. Oh, well that's... yeah. Let's do generate error message here and clean up here. That should be better. Generate error message here and clean up here. And so something I might want to think about if I do my own printf is like, hey, can I, in the case of a specific program, plug in additional customizations in a way that would be easy to get right and not lead to more trouble than it's worth. Okay, there we go. So someone got this. I could, like, you know, deal with, and they sent me a screenshot of this. I could deal with this, right? I could figure out what these error messages are about by staring at them for a few minutes. And if it was something unusual, this extra info here would always be present so that I could make sense of it by, you know, at the worst, looking up their particular config and seeing if the internet knows anything about the issue they're having. All right, so I think that's a clear upgrade. Bullmanator, the only reason I'm using C strings here is because OpenGL returned a C string to me, and I only had one use for it, which was to printf. Right? Very often what I would do is I would get this and I would label this like vendor cster, and then I would go, okay, I need a vendor equals straight C string, and then pass the C string in here and get off of it right away and then work with it. But in this case, all I would do with vendor next is put it here and expand it, right? And then have to put the dot star here. So using length strings here would just mean extra typing, basically. So I broke my normal rule. Oh, EREMITF, that's a C string. Yes, that's a C string because it's a format string. That could also be, you know, a thing where I just go, oh, I do want that to be a length-based string. But length-based strings have a downside in C, which is that they do not make for good literals, right? Because you have to wrap them. So to make this a literal and a length-based string at the same time, I have to mark it somehow with a macro or something. And since format string like functions are 100%, they exist 100% for the purpose of being a convenient interface to generating strings, that would defeat the purpose. Now, if I got into a situation where I was passing strings here that were not handwritten literals, I would reconfigure the system to make that not true. Basically, I never do, here's a format function and here's a variable. It's always a literal there. I think this is the right thing, because if you want to put a variable here with like format things that change their position or something, or that move around relative to each other so that you can plug those in by magic, then you need a more sophisticated string formatting, string generator thing, right? This is an interface for a specific purpose. It does not go well with this being some variable. Essentially, this is a poor man's UI for string building, right? You would want something better, but since you have to make a UI that can be expressed and saved as a text file, this is what we did with C. All right, so there we go. If I have compilation errors now, they will show up better. Now, the other thing to do is to manually instruct the shaders in both of my games here. And by the way, it looks like I have duplicated code because I do. This is pretty much the only thing that's duplicated between the two of them. Other than that, these two systems have, Darklands has its own shaders that do their own things that are different from what my renderer does. So that's like the only bit of duplication I'm living with right now. But now that I've said it out loud and looked at it for a minute, it occurs to me that that could just go live in my OpenGL helpers file, which exists specifically for this purpose. And, oh, that doesn't work. Well, then screw it. It's going back to being duplicated for now. It wasn't that important. It wasn't that important of an idea to begin with. Okay. All right. We'll live with that. Wait. GLSL. Oh, I see what's happened. They didn't have the same names in both contexts. So if I did this, and I pulled it out into the helper header, there we go. All right. Very good. And we've done this as well. Very good. Okay, so we have, this might be a shorter stream today. I was streaming a lot last week, and so I'm probably going to go for a short one. I would definitely like to finish this. I might start this investigation, but that investigation could very well, I think, lead to a much bigger, open-ended problem of building an audio layer that is actually fully constructed and not hacked in, that is designed and integrated into the code base the same way the graphics layer is. And if that's gonna be the only way I can think of to make progress on that issue, then we're not doing that today. But I might be able to spot some obvious issue or something if I spend a little bit of time on it. And so that's where I will start. But I don't think that today I'm up for trying to dig into Wasapi and actually learn how to program and troubleshoot it myself. That might have to be a longer term goal. But we can at least try to do this one. So this is a little bit more exciting to me, which is we are talking about hold on. Whatever music they had on Spotify just now was doing too many lyrics. Take me back to the no lyrics music. By the way, anyone who's hanging out who's wondering about what music I'm talking about, this is a bring your own music stream. I play the music for myself. I don't play it for you guys, so you gotta bring your own music. Okay, the canvas size issue is going to come down to, we have this max canvas width and height, and I think the goal here is to just eliminate that as a concept. Although we might still actually have these constants because these would become not max but initial width and height. Right, but there's another spot where we reference the max width and height, which is here during canvas init, and we definitely want to eliminate this issue here. Well, that's not exactly true. I think that there's still a reasonable max. Like, if someone's passing down here, if they have a 1,000,000 pixel wide monitor, what do we want to do? Let's do this as absolutely as right as we can do it. Okay? That's my goal. So, the way we do it as right as we can do it is we start by asking another question, which is, can OpenGL tell us its maximum texture width and height? Let's take a look. Do the search on the other screen real quick. Just because you never know what pops up while you're trying to search. OpenGL. Let's see. OpenGL query texture size limitations. Okay, this looks like it might be the right idea. So there's a family of functions called glget, which all have a bunch of variations of this function. You pass in a name and it returns a float or an integer. And some of these say things like max storage blocks, active shader storage blocks that can be accessed by all active. I don't know what those mean. But those aren't compute texture image units. Returns one value, the maximum support. That's not probably what I want. Work group max dispatch and direct buffer bind. And these are some. This is some deep OpenGL lore stuff happening here. Color read format, color read type, line, logic, major version. Max 3D texture size. Combined texture image units, combined uniform blocks, map, texture size, max depth, max dropout, map, element into fragment shader, uniform components, fragment uniform vectors. The maximum width for a frame buffer that has no attachments. Okay, maybe interesting. Let's try searching through this with the word texture. Max texture buffer size. The value gives the maximum number of texels allowed in the texel array of a texture buffer object. In the texel array of a texture buffer object. I don't think that's what I want. I'm not talking about texture buffers. Whatever those do. Maximum supported texture image units that can be used to access texture maps from the fragment shader. Okay, so this is like if you're multi-sampling, if you're grabbing samples from multiple textures, how many slots do we get? Max texture size, this might be it. Returns one value. The value gives a Rust estimate of the largest texture that the GL can handle. The value must be at least 1024. Use a proxy texture target such as GL proxy texture 1D, GL proxy texture 2D to determine if a texture is too large. Oh, that's interesting. So maybe this is something I want to look into. Tell me about proxy. So in case anyone watching doesn't know what I'm doing, like why am I digging into such deep OpenGL stuff rather than getting the job done? Remember, the goal here is to do this as right as possible. And when I say as right as possible, what I mean is I want to attempt to resize the canvas in such a way that I accomplish it without generating any OpenGL error codes, if possible. And instead, by talking to the OpenGL API's, capabilities to tell me what will and won't be an error in the way that it would like to be talked to, in the way that doesn't generate errors. And the reason to do it in a way that doesn't generate errors is that even though, yes, you could talk to OpenGL, it makes an error and you go, oh, this didn't work, we backed off. I really want OpenGL errors, like if I put it in debug mode and I have it call a callback that gives me a place to put a breakpoint whenever an OpenGL error occurs, I don't want any path which is technically correct behavior to be correct by going through an OpenGL error. OpenGL errors should only be triggered accidentally, right? They should be a part of They should be bugs. They should correspond to bugs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that I can use those OpenGL error callbacks in the most useful way possible. And things like this are where like sometimes you get annoying situations where someone, finds a way to convince the system to make a big texture, and it technically does the right thing in all cases, but it does it but you didn't talk to the API in a way that avoids making errors along the way. So that's what I mean by doing it as correctly as possible. It also generally, if you do something as correctly as possible, you get more information along the way to help make the system richer, possibly. If target is GL proxy texture 2D, no data is read from data, but all the texture image state is recalculated. Checked for consistency and checked against the implementation's capabilities. If the implementation cannot handle a texture of the requested texture size, it sets all of the image state to 0, but does not generate an error. See, that's what I'm talking about. So this basically lets you run a function in a specific way that you would, but without, if you normally would run it without the proxy, you run it with the proxy and get information about what would happen without it generating errors. To query for an entire MIP-map array, use an image array level greater than or equal to 1. It sets all of the image state to 0. I don't actually know what that means. I'm going to say that this looks like it might be the right path, but I'd like to see some better explanation, some better example code. We've already seen this. Use the proxy target to try out a resolution and format. The implementation will update and recompute its best match for the requested storage resolution and format. To then query the state, called glgetText level parameter. If the texture cannot be accommodated, texture state is set to 0. Texture parameter values for a specific level of detail. Gotcha. So I make a texture with a proxy, and then I check to see if its width and height are non-zero, and if they are, then it's safe. That's the plan. Guys, not a great API design, but if you want me to do this without errors in this way, then this is how I will do it without errors. Fine. Okay. So the other thing we got to do, so that's that we've now. Step 1, we've looked into how would we do this. Is it possible to do this as correct as possible? I'm pretty convinced it is. There's a way to do this in that way where it won't generate any OpenGL errors. It won't require any guesswork. We will be gathering as much information as possible to do operations in the way that is prescribed. The other issue is when we first create the texture, we use this constant to set its size. And the only way that we know its size in the future is by assuming it's equal to this constant. So that's not going to work anymore. We're going to rename these from max to initial. And then probably... Yeah, I'll probably leave these here because 1920 by 1080 neither of them could be smaller for 1920 by 1080, which feels like a good sort of default target for this stuff I make. Although for testing purposes, it might be smart to drop this down to an 8 or something. So if my system if my understanding of all of this is correct, oh, look at that. We got more issues going to come up. This also, yeah, there's more places where it relies on these as correctly reporting the current dimension rather than just the initial dimension. But there we go. We tracked them all down. Now when I run the game, canvas dimension is too big, so I've reconstructed the issue that the other people are having by making my canvas limit so small that even my monitor can trigger it. Now, if I can make it adapt to my monitor, then it should work for them too. Assuming that like OpenGL can create the texture that they need and stuff, which I assume it has to. Like it would be crazy if it couldn't. Okay, so we want to get to a point. Yeah, let's take a look here. The canvas texture is, yeah, so nothing in there updates that. So we're gonna just go v2s32 canvas dim equals, and we'll grab those initial width and height. And then canvas dim x canvas dim y. And then way down here, if we are filling out the state of the renderer, we'll add the canvas dim to the renderer state. So let's see, right here we have the canvas texture in the main frame buffer. We'll just add the canvas dim right next to that. So now we're tracking that as a variable. And let's go look at any places where we might still be referencing this guy. So there. Okay, so here we're going to start going into the renderer and grabbing the canvas dim .y instead of using that macro. Yep. 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 All right. So that shouldn't have changed anything because we haven't written any code that actually changes the canvas dim. So while it's not coded as a constant, it still is a constant in the program because of the fact that it's never changed. So the next step of the trick is here. I don't want to be directly using the width and the height. I want to be using the canvas dim. Now, taking a quick look, are there any other places where the width shows up? No, just those three. Where the height shows up, just those three. Brilliant. Okay. So we've eliminated all occurrences of this except here and where it's used to initialize the canvas in the first place. With that, I think we could just drop it completely and instead say, look, there you go. We just hard-coded it in right there in line. It's dynamic now, so it doesn't make a big difference if it's buried in there. I don't care as much now about having that knob pulled out. So that just cleans some identifiers out of our program, which is always great. I always love to eliminate top levels constructs like global constants and things. If doing so doesn't lead to like ruining the code in other ways, right? In worse ways. constant, a global constant that you only use in one place that has very little relevance to the correct operation of the whole thing doesn't need to be a global constant anymore, though. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to start getting a little bit more, we want to build this out. This is a tiny block of code. This is now going to become, instead of dimensions check, it's going to become dimensions check and adapt, right? It's a more ambitious code path now. So needs to grow equals 0. If it needs to grow, we'll set it to 1, right? And we'll go, well, I guess it's just like, oh man, how do I want to do this? If either of them is big enough, here. I like having this variable here. Don't like having two ifs side by side where one of them is just a chain into the next one for no good reason. If there are a couple more of them, or if they interconnect, or they're spread over distance, all good, but not if they're just side by side for no reason. So either the dimension of the canvas needs to be bigger on the x dimension, on the y dimension, or both. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we need to calculate new canvas dimensions. We'll start with a canvas dimension that we already have. And then we'll do each axis one at a time. So if the dimension we're requesting is bigger than the dimension we have, we'll go like this. Now I have a helper for this. Let me see if I can remember what it's called. pow2 next pow2 u32. So that just takes in an integer and it looks for the next power of 2 either equal to that or above it, right? And so that's what we want there. Give me the next power of 2 at or above dim x. Replace dot x's with dot y. So now we have a new canvas dimension. And now what we're going to do is we're going to, as correct as possible, ask OpenGL if it can make a texture with those dimensions. It's going to look a lot like this. Except we want to stick the proxy right there. Proxy. You're going to come over here to our list of definitions. Let's see, where do you sort in? You sort in right here. Welcome to the club, guys. There we go. All right, so I am testing if the new canvas dimensions will work. Now, there is another question, which is, does this... I do not know. I don't know if this... I don't know if this requires you to generate a texture handle, though. Can I get some, like, example usage anywhere? Yeah, we've seen that doc string everywhere. But your doc strings don't help as much as you think. All right, show me. Have you got? No, you don't have proxy. Arr. You're just gonna give me the doc string, aren't you? Yeah, we know, but the question is, do you need a texture handle? All right, we're gonna have to bifurcate. So what I mean is we have to try it out a couple of ways. Learning about proxy by doing. Yeah. Option 1, try with specially created texture handle. Try with canvas texture handle. Try with no texture handle. Let's begin. GLGen textures. Good. GL bind texture proxy. GL delete textures proxy. Delete textures. Good. That's the right way to do it. And we then need to do that extra step, which we saved over here. Text parameter IV, which needs to go into this. Oh, this would also need to be a proxy. There we go. Proxy level 0 pname texture width. Okay, so that's cool, except OpenGL-defs needs, oh, whoops, we gotta go over to the core. We need to get the GL texture width. Let's grab texture width and texture height while we're hanging out here. Those look like we would drop them right here. And we want to pop in again for GL get text level parameter IV. There it is. Drop that into our functions list. Guess this goes with texture. So let's see. Here's our function name. Parameter list. Bingo. No. Ah, missed the comma here. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so now we can pop over to Remedy. That's not Remedy. Remedy. We can pop over to Remedy and we can, let's see, we want to go to OpenGL render impl line 469. There we go. And I want to see what's happened. So the proxy we got, yeah, we got a texture handle for that. New canvas dims are 2048 and 2048 because the dims were 1920 by 1080 and then rounded up to powers of 2. And the final width we got was 2048. So that does work. Now what I want to do is I want to see for my own with my own eyes what it looks like if that is too big, if it's even possible. GL error, it says. Final width, 0. So it is possible to make it so big that it goes, no, you can't have that. So I asked for, what is this? A 2 million. I asked for a texture with 2 million pixels wide and 2,000 pixels tall, and it said no. Okay, so that's a real thing. That will happen. And so now we've seen what it looks like. It does indeed do that the way we would want. Let's keep going now. We've done a little bit of the testing. So we've done this one. Looks good. What if we try to do this using the canvas texture we already have, right? What I mean is, what if I bind canvas texture from our GL renderer and I test it out? And now the issue I'm considering might occur here is this might not be possible because it's already instantiated as a texture. And the second issue I'm considering is, even if this works, it might be that it will trash the texture when you do this, which, if we wanted a system that could go even farther than what we're going today, would be a problem. It would be good to know that that's an issue, because if it's going to trash the texture, then you can't go, hey, we couldn't grow your texture because it's already as big as it can get. So instead of using your full monitor or the full space you asked for, we've actually set up to take everything you render and scrunch it down and anti-alias it for you, and it's not going to be as good as it would have been if it fit, but it's all we can do. You could imagine even more dynamic adjustment to try to make it do something close to the right thing in as many cases as possible. And trashing the canvas texture just isn't doing the right thing as the most right thing it can do in as many cases as possible. So I need to test if it trashes the texture. But I'll test that separate from if it even works, because it might just say you're not allowed to do that, in which case we don't have to find out. So if I do that, oh, great. Love it when debuggers are the way they are. Okay. So we got a GL error, which suggests to me that this is against the rules. But that did give a final width. I'm curious if I went right here and I went GL enum error equals GL get error, would I actually see an error though from binding this texture with a wrong handle type or something? Let's take a look. There we go. So we got a GL error of some code. GL open GL error. What number was that? 1280. All right. Oh. No, we don't want the Minecraft forums. Here we go. Invalid enum. Okay, so a good way to test this, so if that's correct, invalid enum is 1280. And then the other way we can investigate is we can go over to GL text image 2D. And now that we see, here's the sneaky weird nonsense that happens. Right, with OpenGL, here's the weird thing that happens. They give you a number, like 1280, and then you gotta look for it forever because it's super hard to find any page that maps the numbers to the error codes for some reason. So once you figure out what the name of your error code is, not the number but the name of it, then you can go back to the docs, and they'll tell you on the docs how this particular function actually uses that error code. It's not always the name isn't always enough to intuit it. So it's not this one, because our target is in fact in the list. It's proxy texture 2D. if type is not a constant. What do you mean? I don't know what that means. But that is very weird, actually. So another possibility is that it's actually not an error from right here. But then that means we're getting GL errors. Oh. No. No. If we're getting an error by now, it has to have happened before here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get even more aggressive. We gotta know if a new error happens there. So we're gonna be like this. We're gonna really take a look. OpenGL doesn't provide much of a way to do anything. Does OpenGL provide a way to log out all of the data that you need to go through that flowchart in a single command? So in advanced OpenGL debugging, the story is a little different. Right now, what's happening that sucks, there's no way around it using the old school error system. If I went in and did a couple of changes to upgrade to the advanced error system, what the advanced error system gets you is, instead of having these error codes that you query, where you just get a number back and you have to go and deal with it, it gives you a callback. And your callback gets called whenever an error is generated inside the API. And so you can just break right there and look at what function call did I make that's causing the error. So a big part of what's confusing here is I have no way of knowing for sure that the error code I saw was actually from bind texture. But what's cool about the callback is, in addition to getting an error code, it gives you like an error description string, which I think is as close to what you're asking for as possible. There's a way to get it to give you like more detailed errors through that path. And so then you get two things at once. One, you get, if an error occurs, your debugger can put a breakpoint right there and go like, boom, here it is in your call stack. You see what function call triggered the error, and you get a little descriptive string helping you way more than the number. So that's what exists. It's not a command. It's like a debug mode you can put it into and provide a callback, and then you start getting that kind of debug flow. But there's nothing to help you through the debug flow of the like crappy error system. Okay, let's take a look. Error is 0. Error is 1280. So we've now isolated it. Error 1280 is happening here. It wasn't happening when we used a proxy. So I think that what it's saying, even though it's not documented, here's my guess. Here's my interpretation. It's saying this is an invalid enum because you've already initialized this texture as a GL texture 2D, so you can't initialize it as a GL proxy texture 2D. And so this is an invalid enum now, right? That's my guess. That's my guess of what it's talking about. Okay, so that's good because that means we don't have to ask the more annoying to test question, which is, which would have been, does this trash the texture? The answer is, we don't even have, like, that's not even, it's not even allowed to do this. So trashing the texture wasn't on the table because we couldn't have done this in the first place. Now, what happens if we try, because here's what I would really like. I would really like if I could just say, like, here's my proxy dimensions. I haven't bound any specific texture, but it's a proxy. Why should I make a texture handle, call it a proxy just for nothing to happen? Right? Well, what if proxy just is proxy, it works, proxy works, there's only one proxy and it's always there and it doesn't need to be created or destroyed or handled, because that's what would make sense. Let's see if that's what happens. Because then we are in the best timeline. Oh, except, debuggers would still be bad in this hypothetical timeline, and you would still need an x equals 0 so that you can actually put a breakpoint here. Hey, that is looking good. Now, what makes me concerned here is as I say that this is looking good and it's working on my machine. What if I give this to other people with finicky drivers and their driver's like, that's an invalid usage of the OpenGL API. And my implementation, my driver just happens to be graciously figuring out the sensible interpretation of proxy, but it's not the rigorously correct one. I have no way of knowing if that's what happens or not, because I don't have the ability to test it on all hardware simultaneously. So I don't actually know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the optimistic version. And if we get an OpenGL error, I will get a bug report and then I'll fix it. That's how I'll learn. It looks like that works. So let's test a few other things. What happens if I do stuff like this? Still need this. Actually, there is one other thing I could do. It could also be that in addition to doing something useful, it's also generating an error, and I should check for that as well. So this says no errors have happened, and the final width is 0 because this is an absurd texture size. Okay, so what if I didn't make it 2 million? It's going to ask for 2,000. Here, this would be 4,000. This would be 8,000. This would be 16,000. Let's see if I asked for a 16,000 by 2,000 pixel texture. Yeah, cool. Okay. That confirms that the information flowing in here is flowing out here the way I expect mostly, right? Okay. So what we're going to do then is we calculate the new canvas dimensions, test the new canvas dimensions, and I'm only testing the width. And that's because the docs say that if anything about this is invalid, then all of the states get cleared to 0. Right? So if the X fits but the Y doesn't, I don't need to go and check Y and be sure that the Y it gives me is the right thing or something. It'll either give me exactly what I asked for or clear everything to 0. So this is good enough to check if I got what I wanted. And then this right here is going to be resize the canvas texture. So for that, we need to delete the canvas texture. We're going to set the canvas texture to a new canvas texture. And we're going to, this is only if new canvas is good. Back to the familiar game of refreshing my Spotify. Okay, so if the new canvas is good, and then it's just like up here where I made the canvas texture in the first place. We're going to want to do these things. New canvas texture equals 0. New canvas texture, new canvas texture, new canvas dim, same parameters as before, and then what we'll do is we'll check if GeoGetError does not equal 0, then new canvas is not good anymore. But if, because that means that we had an error somewhere up to this point, right? Somewhere in here we had an error. Do this just so that is blocked, so you don't have to be worried about if variables here spill out. This makes a nice little readable block here. Blah, blah, blah. new canvas is good. If the new canvas is not good, we'll set the new canvas texture to 0. Trying to think of the best way to make this flow. For now, I think that keeping the text. So one I thought is maybe I want to keep this texture alive for as long as possible. And so the way that would work is we make the new texture, we test it out, we only delete this if we've gotten this far and it's successful. So it'd be like this. Here's how you would do it. If new texture does not equal 0, then you go ahead and you save the new texture to replace the old texture, right? You delete the old texture, you save the new one onto the old one. And here, if we have gotten this far, but then if it's not true that the new canvas is good, then if the new canvas texture is like a real texture, so like we created a texture and that was fine, but then an error happened in here somehow, then we go for GL delete textures, and we delete the new canvas texture and we set it to 0, right? So if we had an error and the texture was allocated, we free it. That's the basic idea. And then if we were trying to set up a new texture and we got to the end and we actually still have a new texture, then we save the new texture over the old one. Now, after all of that, if the new canvas is not good, that could have happened because the initial check failed or because something failed in the intermediate path here. So if it is not good, then we're going to still have to emit an error. And the error we're going to emit is going to be like this. Right? And then popping over here, we had a good error message. Requested canvas dimension is too big. Right? So we just fall back to the error message we had. We were going to try to eliminate it, but it turns out there are possibilities of this still failing, but we've put this much effort into trying to veer off of the path of failing if the initial texture is too small. Oh, right, and canvas texture isn't a thing. We want to grab the renderer and poke into its texture handle. Interesting. So we almost did the right thing, but we also need to change the canvas dimensions when we change the canvas itself. Okay. So it's not having an error, and it's not having an error message come up, right? It's not like, oh, we failed to change the texture size. And it's not giving me an OpenGL error either, so nothing in OpenGL is failing, and yet I'm getting a black screen now. And I'll bet you that if we start with 2048 by 2048, it works. So while nothing says that an error is happening, something about this isn't working. And I'll tell you what it is. I just figured it out. The canvas texture is a variable that holds a handle. And that handle refers to an object. And when we created that object, we attached it to a frame buffer. And when I change the canvas texture variable to contain a new handle, that does nothing to the frame buffer object. So if we get this far and we are setting up the new texture, in addition to setting up the new texture, we also need to bind the main frame buffer off of the renderer and attach the new canvas texture onto that frame buffer. There we go. So if I start with dimensions of 8, it then goes bloop and expands automatically to the right size. And so hopefully that will fix the screen size issues for anyone else as well. All right, so that's some pretty good stuff. We've made it for about 2 hours. I want to go ahead and begin this investigation, and then we'll be done for today's stream. If you're hanging out, I'll give you an idea now about my streaming schedule moving forward. Last week was an unusual case because I was having a game jam. Normally I will stream on Mondays and Fridays, and what we did today is roughly what I will always do on a Monday, which is I might do it sooner in the day, or I might do it later in the day. I might also do it on a Sunday or a Tuesday. My whole schedule is always plus or minus one. But on Mondays, I'm going to dig into just some production work stuff that I need to do, like whether it's upgrading to fix some bugs that people are hitting. I need to, like, expand the texture, give the feature to expand the canvas as necessary. These kinds of things that they might not necessarily be joyful, but they're important. I want to start the week off with that kind of thinking. I want to start the week off with, let's get in there and do some of the building of my project, of my code base, right? Giving it new features and debugging annoying issues and stuff like that. And then on Fridays, I'll stream, again, plus or minus one, and for that, I'll do something that's supposed to be fun. So that might be fun as in reading code for an algorithm that I've never learned before that I think would be fun. It might be fun as in building an open source game, take an old school game like Doom or a roguelike or something and build it from source. It might be something fun as in doing something that isn't programming at all, like trying out some software tools or trying out some games from people. It could be anything that I think would be fun. So that's going to be my streaming schedule. And let's take these last 10-15 minutes to take a look at this other big issue that I had on the list for the day. So the person who submitted this had a crash which they sent me the OpenGL, or not the Visual Studio message, but most of this, this is a crash inside of the Windows audio code. This is not I don't have a file called audio client core.cpp. This isn't me. This must be implementation code for Wasapi or something. You can see it's inside of a DLL called audio ses.dll or something like that. Maybe audio session DLL, not sure. But it also came with this clue, which is that it crashed at a variable amount of time, and it started with some really bad noisy loudness for the moments before it crashed. So that's a super interesting crash. Because it sounds non-deterministic. They said things like they could get into the game for a few moments sometimes, but not other times. It never lasted long, but it never died for the same exact specific amount of time. In the exact same specific amount of time. It wasn't like a set number of steps had to happen or something into the game, or a specific sequence of events had to happen. So it sounds to me like it's a non-deterministic bug, in the sense that even though it reliably happens, it is not happening for reasons that will be exactly the same every time you see it, even if you could catch it in the debugger. And the other reason I go that direction is because that seems to me very plausible. Part of what happens when you have audio systems is you have your program wants to render out samples and say, here's the audio for you to play. And another system wants to read the samples and put them into the speaker. And unlike a animation of a frame loop, we're not talking about a 60 samples per second or 120 samples per second. We're talking about like 40,000 samples per second, I think, right? Like it's like 44 or 48,000 or 44,100. There are some, these are like some of the standard frequencies. So there's a lot of these things going out per second. And the amount of them, like the synchronization ends up being a little bit non-deterministic, because if my frame is just a millisecond faster or slower to get back to the audio system, a lot more samples might already have been picked up by the audio backend, and so the amount of space that I am supposed to fill with for audio samples shifts around a little bit more. It wiggles around. There might be more or less samples. They might be farther into the future or closer to the present, from frame to frame, and the system is supposed to adapt to this smoothly. But because there's that non-determinism built in there from the beginning, it feels very natural to me to conclude from the description of the bug and from the fact that it relates to audio that it's probably something non-deterministic that is causing the crash. Okay, so if that's the situation, how do you debug something that's non-deterministic? Well, I can't reproduce it because it's not even an issue on my computer, right? I can come over here to build fly, which is the script that is attached to my F1 key. So I can build Darklands. Oh, look at that. Darklands doesn't build anymore. What did I change that might have... Oh, yeah. I changed... Okay, Darklands has its own references to those. So let's this is good. If we're gonna be debugging issues that were in the Darklands code, let's at least get it building again, and then we'll get back to talking about how to debug the audio issue in more detail. Okay, you don't need to emit logs anymore. You just go, if the handle equals 0, that's a problem. The handle shouldn't be 0. Right? If the handle equals 0, that's an error. There's no handle here or here. And then we can drop those in. Right, you don't need the scratch arena anymore, because we eliminated the need for returning strings from these functions. And then everywhere where I'm using the program, I don't need to access it through .handle anymore. I can just use the name of the root variable, which is wonderful. Excellent. Okay. I suspect that this would have a similar problem with a 5K wide monitor, based on the fact that this is probably the dimensions of the backing canvas. Anyway, getting to the end of the stream. Darklands builds, and then we want to go over to the runfly script. This is the script attached to my F2 key, and there we go. So I can be sure now when I play it, when I start the game, here. When I start the game, nothing wrong with the sound system. Yeah, nothing wrong with it. So I can't reproduce it because it doesn't happen on my machine. And the sound system sort of seems to work. But I want to show you something. I don't know if you guys will be able to hear this, but whenever I was working on this, and even now, when I launch the game, there's a little click. And when I close the game, there's a click. Do you hear that? I didn't have time during the jam to investigate how the code works and why I might be getting a click. But even then I was thinking maybe there is something I missed about how to correctly set this up. And if I'm getting a non-deterministic bug about filling these buffers that literally leads to a crash, like it reads or writes some, accesses some data, some memory location it's not supposed to access, and I'm getting that click, I don't know that they're connected. And it might be I could investigate the click today and eliminate it and the other person would still have their bug. But it's also possible that the reason I'm getting the click is because there's a chunk of buffer that I'm supposed to fill that I'm not filling. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like if the system is set up in such a way that it's possible for me to leave some memory uninitialized and submit that for audio processing, and it's just the first 60th of a second, then that extra random garbage data they got through would get through as a click. Can you hear the click? I don't know if you can hear it, but when I run the game and when I stop it, there's a click. And for another piece of information about this situation, let me go investigate this real quick. I know I have it somewhere, but it might not be on this computer. It might have been something that was not saved into the main code base. Yeah, I'm gonna need to go and get this real quick. So I got this from a GitHub gist. Let me see if I can find it. I'm not finding it super easily. I wish that when websites gave you a search function, that they were good. Like, I don't like how I'm on this page looking through. I know it was a Martin's Mosaico gist, and so it's one in here somewhere. And then when I try to search, it's like searches the whole website. And there's no obvious way to say no. I put in his name in the Wasapi name and nothing comes up. It's possible it's not listed. It's possible that the people who pointed me to it had a link to it even though it's not like public or something, I guess. It's possible. Maybe it's not a gist, maybe it's like a Git repo. No, I'm not finding it anywhere. Which is frustrating because what I would like to do is to compare my code with the example code and see if I changed anything that would be obviously a problem, but I can't find it. So I'm going to have very little chance of just spotting an issue by staring at the audio code. I'll show you what it looks like. Oh, here we go. Old me was thinking I put the link right in the code. There we go. So here's the gist I based it on. And I'm going to download this real quick. And the reason for that is I want to show you that I don't think the original was clicking. I don't think the original had a clicking problem. If it doesn't click when it starts and stops, but mine does, then that further confirms my theory that that we're looking at me using the code wrong somehow. But if I build this example and it still clicks whenever you start, then we're basically done. There's nothing I can do because I'm not going to go down the path of tonight. I'm not going to go down the path of learning the APIs and determining exactly the best way to set up Wasapi to avoid that. But if the demo doesn't have a click, then the difference between my code and the demo should contain the creation of the click, right? The click should be somewhere between the delta somewhere inside the delta between my code and the example code lies the source of the click, if there's no click in the example. So that's why I'm building it real quick. So this is just clexample.c. Maybe make sure we have a ZI on there. All right, so it built, and there it is, example.c and the Win32 Wasapi. I just built it like right in the same folder. Maybe what I should do is cd into a build folder, just so it doesn't spam all that stuff everywhere. And maybe I should build, let's say, set path equals current directory, and then use the path variable to get the full path to the example.c after I change directory. CL is not recognized. Really? You recognized it a moment ago, but I guess maybe my forward slash probably confused you. No, you're still not getting it. How did you just go from knowing how to use CL to not knowing how to use CL? What's that about? Okay, here it knows about CL. Here it doesn't know about CL. Whoa, okay, so here it knows about CL. Here it doesn't know about CL. All I did was set a variable. I didn't even change the command. Right? If I comment this out, it works. If I do build cd build / example, it works. But if I set a variable, it stops working. Am I setting the variable wrong? Do I have any other batch files to compare against? No, that's how you set a variable. What? Do you like to have your arguments? What could explain that? That is wild. I've never hit this. Okay. I'm going to stop forcoder for a moment because maybe I sealed on this one. I pop over to the Wasapi example. Delete out all of this again. Try to build. What? What? Because I set a variable? Oh, you know what? It's because I'm setting a variable called path. That's incredible. Yes, path is the environment variable where it uses to find all your programs, including CL. So by changing path, I was hiding CL from the system. That makes sense. Can't believe yeah, chats figured it out. That was a that was a kind of mistake that I have not made before. It's funny because I know what path is. It's just when I'm sitting here staring at it in this exact context, my brain completely blanked on the relevance of the variable name for a moment there. You know, it's not always that which variable name you pick matters, but in this context it is. But the part of my brain that was checking for that just didn't turn on. Okay. We're back. So we can build, and it actually generates some sane result. We pop in over here to the Wasapi example and go into the build folder for that example now. If I run example, I didn't hear a click. I escape, no click. Yeah, it's not clicking. So there's definitely some nastiness in how I adopted this into my code that I didn't understand. So we're gonna pull up these two bits of source code, and then we're gonna jump back to Darklands audio. We're gonna try to figure out how I messed it up. So I copy pasted like the struct is not changed in any way. I did like manhandle some of these to just stick them into, like I forward declared some things that weren't forward declared, and then removed the comments and just left the functions. So we got like start, stop, lock buffer, unlock buffer. These are all the same. Nothing changed. I declared those. Those aren't new. It's just a they weren't declared before. Now this is doing these things, which I skip over. These I just link manually. Those are linker directives. So as long as they're getting linked, if they were failing to get linked, it would just get an error like, hey, we couldn't find function X or Y or Z or whatever. And we're not getting errors like that, so that's not relevant. I replaced this assert with my own, but that shouldn't be relevant because even if this only, like, if my code was hitting an assert, we would see it, which we're not. The crash we're seeing doesn't appear to be an assert, and if I was using it correctly, it shouldn't be asserting anyways, right? So like even if my assert is busted, which would be like, what does that even mean? It wouldn't be possible for it to be the reason why it runs but has a click. These are identical, except I've moved the braces up everywhere. Yeah. My guess, like, yeah, this will be identical all the way through here. I didn't even bother to move the braces. Round up POW2. Kept that the same. WA start. No differences here. Yep, kept all of this the same as it was in this part. WA stop. I moved the brace up. But besides that, it's the same. Lock the buffer. It looks like I moved one brace and the rest of it's the same. Unlock the buffer. Okay, so all the stuff that's in wasapi.h, I copied over mostly the same, maybe a little bit of style change here and there, but and swapped out the assert, but none of that should matter. So let me look. It feels like the problem has to be in the usage part. Now I have usage code in the same exact file right here next to it. So let me see if I can get a handle on what might be different. So here we have Wasapi audio. I have instead of audio, I have DL audio. WA start. This is a 48,000 inside of a macro. This is a 2 inside of a macro. Speaker front left, speaker front right, matches. So these are the same, except that this is a global variable and this is local in the main loop. I assert that the buffer format, so here the buffer format is being read. We're going, hey, look at the buffer format. Grab n samples per second, grab n block align, and it's going to use those. I'm just asserting that those match certain constants. So if this was responsible for the problem, we would be hitting an assert, which isn't the effect we're getting. So this isn't asserting. They're getting the values I assert that they have. The reason I'm not grabbing the variables is just so that I don't have to store more variables up here, and instead I can just assume that these constants hold. Again, if the person who reported the crash was hitting this, they wouldn't hear noise first. It would just be immediate and deterministic. So that doesn't fit. This isn't the bug. This is not the reason that they're not able to run the demo. Now, let's see what else happens here. Loading the sound. I don't think sload does anything directly with the Wasapi wrapper functions. It's just reading a file from the hard drive using the Media Foundation stuff. Out the end, all it is one of these sound structs, right? It's not like it's creating handles or anything. We can see a sound is just some 16-bit signed integers and a counter for that, and then some state for playing that sound bundled together. Update takes in a sound pointer and a number of samples and updates the position of the sound based on how many samples have played. Mix takes in out samples, so the samples it needs to fill, and a sound, and it fills these samples by adding those into, it scans over the samples in this sound, adds them into the sample, the outgoing sample, so it mixes them together. So these are just file loads, basically. Here it gets the standard input handle. That's not relevant to making sounds. That's a part of, if we look at this, we run example. That's for making this work. And I can press D to insert a time delay. And the point is it's showing that the time delay doesn't cause any hiccups in the playback. And I can stop and there's no click. Okay. Locks the buffer. So in order to do audio mixing, it does lock the buffer, determine how many samples to write. I do lock the buffer at the beginning of render begin, audio render begin. I lock the buffer. I figure out how many samples to fill, which is the same thing because I asserted that the sample rate is, instead of grabbing that from the buffer format, I just asserted that the one in the buffer format matches my macro. So this and this are equivalent, which makes this whole thing equivalent to this whole thing. Memory 0 here. We're filling the output, which comes from the audio sample buffer, with zeros, using the number we're trying to fill, times bytes per sample. Bytes per sample came from n block align, which I asserted to be 8. So yeah, it's the same. By the way, it's 8 because each sample is a 4 byte integer, and there are 2 channels, so there are 2 sample values per sample. So you get 8 bytes. And then I do this, which is just a setup to fill this buffer thing, which tells it how to... Right, so here you can see there's this play count thing. This is how to advance the playback positions of the sounds that have played. In other words, it's how many, that goes right here. It's how many, it's how many samples we need to not write again. So we have this buffer we're filling. It's possible that when we come back to fill in audio, that some of the audio we filled in before hasn't been played yet. In fact, we're hoping some of it hasn't been played yet, because if we got to the end of what we filled, like the player played what we filled, and we didn't come back yet, then it's going to play stuff that we didn't prepare, which might make like a looping sound of audio or some scratch or clicks or something. Not clicks in the beginning, but like throughout, which we don't. My Darklands demo doesn't have audio clicks throughout the play. It's just at the beginning and end. Fill sample count and the sample buffer are the 2 pieces of information that you need in order to do things like the mixing part. Advanced sample count comes from the play count, which is what lets you do this part. Then some other work happens outside of this code that we're looking at here on the left. So it's possible, in theory, I guess, that the issue doesn't lie here, but I have good reason to think that's not the main thing, because first of all, I'm mem0 here, so the only way that this buffer has something other than zeros in it is if I fill it with garbage on the first frame. I don't think that's very likely. And then I unlock. You unlock and you tell it how many samples you decided to write, so that it can work with that in the back end. And I do that the same as it happens here. So none of that looks obviously different from what I did. It's possible, I guess, that the fact that I don't have a stop leads to the outgoing click. So like we could rule that out. Right, by doing this. Then the Darklands program just needs to end with DL audio stop. And I don't see any reason why that removes the click at the beginning. Maybe it removes the click at the end. I would be a little surprised if it did, but maybe it will. So let's check it out. There's a click. There's a click. Okay. So it's still clicking on both sides. There's also like a weird humming. It's almost like it's making a sound. And I can't help but wonder if what we're seeing is not directly related to the code here, but maybe it's somewhere else. So this is render begin, render end. Where does that happen? Okay, so in my main loop, every frame, I have a moment where I do render begin, mix audio, render end. Render begin and end are like lifted straight from the example, but with the only thing in the example in the middle that I didn't keep is this stuff, right? So here, the mixing, and here the updating, I've replaced with app mix audio. So this and this all happen during begin. This happens during render end. This and this happen in mix audio. I'm pretty sure these are fine. So I think that what we must be seeing is that maybe mix audio is a little bad. And what if I don't run DL mix? No click. Okay, no click. No click. Okay. Click. Click. Okay, so DL mix must contain the issue. So I have a couple of ideas. Let me refresh my memory of how this is structured. Volume, 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 tri-frequency. Okay, got it. So if I go into the DL mix function, that lives right here in audio. One thing I can do is here we see the main area where we're looping over samples and filling them. Now, I can block off each of the main oscillators in the audio system. And now no click. And then I can say, let's re-enable them and see if there's a specific one that causes the issue. Okay, so square one, no click. Right? So let me, right? No click. I don't know if you guys could hear the click before. This is what the game sounds like with just the square audio. And then if I keep going, I have a theory that the triangle is what makes the click. Okay, so I've enabled 3 of the 4 blocks. If I turn on the triangle block, I get click, click. Yeah. So what I think is happening is that I modeled this after the NES, and the NES didn't have volume control on the triangle channel. And so what it would do is to make something, since the triangle channel is just there, it's not like you could turn it on or off. You would just set a low enough frequency that it would be like imperceptible noise, that it shouldn't be perceptible. And I kind of try to do the same thing here. So the triangle oscillator's frequency, if it's 0, why can I hear it? Well, a 0 here makes a 0 oscillator here. This isn't necessarily at 0. S. Right. If I'm understanding correctly, this becomes, okay, that's if it's less than 16. So J, try oscillation. So if this is a 0, this becomes 0. J is 0. J is less than 16. So yeah, this is completely wrong. This should be if J is greater than or equal to 16. And that doesn't fix the click. But that was just silly that I had made that mistake. This was coming out negative, and this was coming out negative every time. They're supposed to be positive numbers. But even with that, when we start, even if this is 0, it makes this a 15, which makes this a non-zero. And so it's like we get a little pop as it goes up. Yeah, there's a pretty easy fix for this. So we could say that'll be a 0 through 15, and then this will be... $31 minus the J. So when a 16 comes in here, this will still be making a 15, which is what it should be making. And as this gets closer and closer to 32, like it'll get up to 31, which will make a 0. When it gets to 32, it'll wrap around and then it'll make another 0 on this side. Okay, so that removes the click, which is nice. Yeah, no more clicking. I like that. That is good. If I was going to keep working on this game long term, I would fix the clicking in a stronger way, which is to say, it's cool and all to reconstruct the sound of the NES, but we could go ahead and add volume controls to the triangle wave. Like, I'm not actually trying to run this on an NES. I just wanted to recreate the sound. But I don't need to operate within these like weird technical constraints to make that to work with that. However, after all of that, nothing we did really seems very relevant to an audio crash. So I don't think we made any progress on that question. And in fact, I guess I had to close forecoder along the way. In order to solve that, I think what I would have to do is get Mr. Mixer, who's the individual who submitted this, who is, I know, very good to work with bug issues and stuff. I'd have to get them to try and run Martin's Wasapi Gist and see if it has the problem too, because I'm pretty convinced that I'm using it correctly now. I eliminated the click, which was the only clue I had that maybe I had some non-determinism, but I didn't. I didn't have non-determinism causing that. We fixed the click without finding any non-determinism. So I need to see if the Wasapi just runs on their computer, because if that doesn't run either, then there's nothing. I will not be able to fix it. If the Wasapi just runs fine on their computer, but my game doesn't, then I can use the difference of I can use that existence of those two different outcomes to guide further iteration, but I can't do any of that right here on stream tonight. So I think we are done. I'm going to wrap it up and let you guys know a little bit about what I am going to be doing moving forward with some of my projects. So you can go to mrforth.com. I've got software projects, I've got video projects, I've got a newsletter. You can find all kinds of stuff about what I'm working on here. And you can also, I'm more and more using itch to release demos of things. So mr-forth.itch.io. You can find the last two game jams, which we were working on today, plus other stuff I've released in the past there. And I will probably, in the next stream, it'll be a Friday, so I talked about this a little bit earlier in the stream, but I'll probably be getting back into the SAT solver, which I touched a couple of weeks ago. I'll probably be getting back into that project, maybe walking through some mini SAT code, maybe working a little bit more on writing my own SAT solver at some point. So you can come to hang out with me again this upcoming Friday. And besides that, thanks for coming to hang out, and I hope you guys have a good day.